Hello, I'm Katie and this is Stepmum Space, the judgment-free zone where we'll talk candidly about the fairy tales and scary tales of stepmum life. So whether you've been a stepmum for years, you're just starting out, or you want to understand the stepmum in your life a little bit better, this is the place for you. Before we get into today's episode, I wanted to remind you that the Stepmum Forum is up and running and free to join at www.stepmumspace.com/forum. So if you want to meet other women in the same boat, do take yourself to the forum at stepmumspace.com and share a little bit about your story so you can meet others who truly understand what it's like. There's also now a Christmas chat board on there for anyone who needs advice or support or to have a little rant in the run-up to Christmas. Back to today's episode then. My guest today is Sarah. I was really fascinated by Sarah's story as soon as she emailed me, as it isn't one that we've heard on the show before. Sarah, by her own admission, is a very reluctant stepmom. And unlike most men, when Sarah's husband left his first wife, he actually ended up spending more time with his kids than he did when he lived with them. And this brought quite a few challenges about for him and for them as a couple. It's a pretty raw chat and there might be some of it which makes you feel a bit uncomfortable, but as always on this podcast, I really want to give airtime to people's differing experiences of stepmotherhood, and I'm sure Sarah won't be alone in some of her feelings. I hope you enjoy the show, and as always, I'd love to know what you think, so do get in touch. Welcome, Sarah. How are you doing today?
I'm really good, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good. I've had a couple of people ask me this week, have I done all my Christmas shopping? And I'm like, no, it's November. Why are you asking me?
No, too early for that.
Online shopping exists for a reason. So look, thank you so much for chatting to me. And I was really grateful when I got your email because I think your story is so interesting and there'll be a lot of women out there who will feel the same but may not have spoken to anybody about it, and it doesn't often kind of come up in this way. So I really, really appreciate you getting in touch with me, and I'm sure lots of people listening will do as well. So why don't you start by telling me a little bit about how your relationship with your now husband began?
Okay, so we've been together for just over a couple of years now, and we had, I guess, a slightly contentious start in that it was a very casual relationship. It was not quite transactional, but very nearly there. And it was always, we went into it both with exactly the same mindset that it had a very short shelf life. It was essentially to fill time, to fulfill a need. I was in the process of moving overseas, so I knew that I was moving literally within a few months. My husband had literally just left his first marriage, so he wasn't in a position to, to have anything more than that. So it did start off, as I say, incredibly casually, and it was a very odd, I guess, relationship because there was no pressure, there was no expectations. We were incredibly open with each other, probably far too open in hindsight. It very quickly grew into an amazing friendship, and then it progressed from there. Even though it was probably the most open relationship I'd ever been in, the issue of his children was never really discussed. I knew that there were kids. I knew nothing about ages, sexes, names. To be quite frank, I didn't want to know. It was fairly irrelevant to me. I'm not particularly child friendly, so I had no interest in knowing, how Timmy's performing at school or, whatever it may well be. And my husband very much compartmentalizes things, so didn't particularly want to talk about them either. So it was like the one area of both of our lives that actually we didn't share information on. But as I say, everything else was incredibly open.
Had you ever considered dating somebody with kids before?
I actually did date a couple of people with kids, I guess, early on in my dating career. So I'm in my late 30s now. So in my early 20s, there were a couple of boyfriends that did have children.
And I think we just have to take a moment to commend you on calling it a career.
It has been one.
I like that a lot.
It's been a great one, to be fair. But yeah, there was one or two. They weren't particularly serious relationships. I mean, at that age, I wasn't particularly desiring a serious relationship anyway. But as time went on, it became more and more apparent to me that that kind of lifestyle is just not what I want. I didn't want to date anyone with children for multiple reasons. You know, fundamentally, I'm quite selfish. I like being the center of attention. So I like being in a situation where if I am in a relationship, that quite frankly, I want the other person to focus on me. I want to be the center of their universe. And for me, I'm not that person that always has to be in a relationship. I'm very happy being single. And a lot of the time, I actually prefer being single. So even getting into a relationship in itself for me is a big deal. So yeah, I never wanted to be with anyone with children, or certainly not in a serious way at all. And if I was looking for someone, I would be that person that, you know, on the apps or the sites or whatever with the filters, you know, do they have children? You know, it's hell no, definitely not remotely interested in it whatsoever.
So then you're in this situation where you are about to kind of pack up your life and move overseas. You're having a casual relationship with a guy. He's literally just left his marriage. And then suddenly, I guess there's a shift. What happened?
Yes, very much so. It was literally that oh shit moment. My husband, a couple of times, sort of, you know, this was after sort of 2 3 months or so, you know, he'd said a couple of comments of, you know, do you think you'll ever settle down, or are you likely to ever commit to someone? And you kind of think, okay, where's this questioning going? Yeah, it literally was a, oh crap, wait a minute, I can't cope with the thought of you not being with me. And to be honest, my first thought was, do you know what, he can come overseas too. You know, we're just going to start this new life together, travel the world, blah blah blah. But it literally just one day was just, oh, okay. And my husband had exactly the same thing of, wait a minute, this is not what it was designed to be. What do we do? And we had, I mean, obviously we were struggling with the situation in its entirety anyway, but we did have quite a big period of time where it was, you know, our relationship didn't exist in reality because of the nature of it. We weren't living together, we weren't doing chores, or, you know, the day to day that normally irritates you about a partner. We obviously didn't have that interaction. And so we were both very aware that probably a lot of these feelings were generated because we didn't have the pressures of a usual relationship. And
Mm.
so if we were to transfer over to one, you know, is reality going to kick in? Is it actually the, you know, the excitement will go, we'll get into the mundane and be bored. There was almost like this light bulb moment of, oh, we want it to be more, but then actually we took quite a long period of time to work out, could it be more? Is it viable? Is it something that we both really want? We both are absolute opposite ends of the spectrum in terms of lifestyles, beliefs, etc. So it took quite a while for us to actually get to the stage of, okay, yes, let's give it a try.
Yeah. And in that process, how did you navigate the fact that you knew he had kids?
Badly, honestly. So it was that subject that I put off constantly, my husband put off constantly, and we were literally sat on the sofa one day. I kind of just out of the blue just turned around to him and said, look, I guess I have to know, tell me, how many kids have you got? And his answer was 3. I was like, okay, that's a lot. um, and then, what ages are they? And this was the bit that my husband was dreading telling me. I was kind of living in this like dream world of, oh, it might be like a 17-and-a-half-year-old that lives in Australia that he sees like once a year or something, you know, it might be something that you know is manageable. And it wasn't. It was basically 3 very young children. So at this time, the kids were 5, 8, and then he literally had a third one that was a few months old. And it was the third one, which was the one that he was worrying so much about me knowing. Because obviously it's a massive commitment, it's a long commitment. And, you know, it raises a lot of questions about actually his first marriage and whether that actually was sustainable. It was a shock. And to be honest, I asked him to leave. I did not take the news well. And then it took a long, long time to process that, that they existed and that they were the ages that they were.
And how long had you guys been sort of seeing each other at this point?
Oh, months.
Yeah.
And I had completely fallen for him by this point. It was very much invested in him. As part of these conversations, because I had a job offer and that's why I was moving, I declined the job offer. I terminated the move. My house was already on the market in anticipation of the move. I proceeded with the sale of my house, but basically I invested the money to buy us a family home. So I was already fully committed at this stage. And it's one of those things, in hindsight, we should have had the conversation a lot earlier than what we did. It was, fairly horrific, to be honest, to hear this. And it did really center on the little one. The elder two, I can manage their ages. They're not ideal, but I can manage that. But having essentially this baby come along, it's just like, wow, okay, this is a lot.
And I guess there was a pretty good reason why he hadn't mentioned this up until now.
He knew how I would react, I think. He also had been receiving a huge amount of judgment from various people in his life about the first marriage ending with such a young child. It was literally the most contentious subject. And he was getting almost abused, I guess, that he was leaving this marriage with a baby that was so young. And it was such a sore, sensitive subject that I think, to be honest, even if I reacted in the most amazing, supportive of ways, it still would have been a horrific process, I think, for him to sort of discuss it and what have you. It definitely blindsided me, that's for sure.
Yeah, and I think there's a great pressure on men, because the men that I often speak to will either feel themselves consciously or have been made to feel like they've left their children, but they don't leave their children, they leave a marriage.
Yeah, no, and I absolutely agree with you. And my parents themselves are divorced and they split up when I was very young. And I've always had the mentality that a child is much better off with two happy parents, whether they live independently or not, And that was very much my attitude to it. But as I say, pretty much every other person in his life that knew about the separation, because at this stage it was still not particularly public knowledge, they were really quite awful. And it was, he's abandoning the children, he's awful for leaving the ex-wife with such a young baby. There was no one that was supportive, no one that said, actually, do you know what, we can tell you'll be happier out of this, you need to get out. It was very much, you're almost going to hell for doing it.
Generally, people assume that when a baby comes along, the couple are super happy and everything's wonderful and they've had this baby. But in reality, we know that a lot of babies come along not in amazing places in people's marriages.
No, and my husband is, or he was at the time, incredibly closed off, incredibly reserved. And so he would never be particularly open with his feelings or what's really going on. And his ex is actually pretty similar. And, only really kind of in the recent months, the full story kind of really comes out. And it was a situation where, quite frankly, I don't think either party had been happy for years. The first children were conceived almost out of duty or obligation as opposed to desire. And then I think it became very apparent that the marriage was failing. And unfortunately, it was decided that having another child was the way to rescue this marriage. But obviously, it didn't do that at all. It made the situation a hell of a lot worse. And so that's what prompted him to leave so quickly after the birth.
So you've got to the point where you've kind of sacked off your career plan to move abroad, which in itself is a massive deal. And you've sold your house, you've bought a family house whilst kind of a few months ago having been confident you don't want to date someone with kids. So this is like a lot of change for you going on. Like when you look back at what you were going through, how would you describe that?
I think I was insane. It's one of those things at the time, it felt like 100% the right thing to do. And I was very convinced of that. I'm also quite a savvy person in terms of I knew, well, actually, if this does all end tomorrow, I can always sell the new house and I'll probably make a profit. You know, there's always another job offer there. So I wasn't completely kind of completely closing doors. It was I always had that idea of a safety net that, do you know what, if this fails, it's okay, I'll still survive. It just felt like absolutely the right thing to do. And that kept you going for quite a while. And again, it's only after quite a few months that you actually start to think, oh, wait a minute, what have I done? What are the real practicalities that have arisen as a result of this? And for our situation, it took us quite a few months just to navigate practicalities. And then the emotions kicked in. And it's been harder for us to navigate the emotional fallout of it all. So it literally is only in the last probably like month or two that we're getting to a place where I think we're both happy with what we've done over the course of the relationship, or we've accepted what we've done. Maybe not necessarily be happy about it. I think it was just naivety. This kind of you were in love. You thought, I've met the love of my life. Let's just do this.
Yeah.
And say it took a while for reality to kick in.
So you bought this house, and did he move in with you straight away?
Well, yes and no. He basically went from the old marital home to a room in a shared house, and he was there for a little while. Very quickly after we kind of made this decision to try and make a go of things, he started to stay at my house on the days that he didn't have the children.
And how often did he have the kids at this point?
So when he really had a room in a shared house, he didn't actually have them hugely frequently, in that it was every week, every 2 weeks, but it was a couple of hours here, a couple of hours there. And he essentially had them at the marital home because obviously having the children in the shared house was just not suitable. He then moved into a rented flat. On days that he didn't have the kids, he was at my house. On days that he did have the kids, he stayed at the flat. So we were living this relationship where essentially it was almost 50-50, like 50% living together, full on, making plans for our future. And then, well, it's probably more about 40%. He was at the flat with the children. So it went from him having them basically never unsupervised, which sounds a bit pathetic. You know, he's a grown ass man, yet he never had his kids unsupervised for a couple of hours here, there, to having them for 2 to 4 days in a run. And for 3 kids, obviously the baby was still a baby. He'd had no huge interaction with the baby at that point. So he was thrown into this massive situation. And he'd gone from, as I say, never having, well, not really having the children unsupervised. He was always very much on the periphery, to all of a sudden being immersed into a situation where he's got kids for days at end. And we're essentially living separate lives during these periods because at this point, the children still didn't know about me. So I wasn't involved in any shape or form. Understandably, they took his focus during that time. So it's almost like we didn't have a relationship during those days. So it was a very odd dynamic to be in.
Yeah, and I guess still to your point earlier about you were in a relationship, but it wasn't kind of real, you possibly felt a little bit similar because you're in this relationship half the time, but there's this huge chunk of his life that's sort of unspoken.
Yeah, absolutely. And it very quickly became an issue for us in that, yeah, when we were together, we were making plans for the future. We were finalizing, my house sale, the purchase of the new house, even thinking, okay, how are we going to decorate the new house? And yet there is this massive section of time that I wasn't involved in. And at the time, it was a deliberate decision. So the divorce was ongoing during this process. His ex-wife didn't want the marriage to end. And so she was making life difficult, but not through your stereotypic crazy type way. It was very much, she was very upset, quite distressed. Obviously, she'd just had a baby, so her hormones were all over the place as well. So we were trying to be as considerate and courteous to everyone physically possible. And all it did was screw up our relationship. So again, in hindsight, we wouldn't have taken that approach.
And at that point, the ex-wife and the children still didn't know about you.
Correct. Correct. They did not know at all.
How did that make you feel?
Awful. Absolutely awful. There was a couple of instances where, for example, there was a long-standing holiday that had been booked. And by this point, they were living apart, very much separate lives. But they decided, in the best interest of the children, they were going to go on this holiday still. And I think anyone, if their partner says, I'm going on holiday with my ex, regardless of the situation, that does ring some alarm bells of, oh, okay. So I was obviously very displeased about it. I could see the argument for the children's sake, but I also conversely thought, well, actually, either parent could easily take the children away by themselves. But they went off on their merry way on this holiday. And because the ex didn't know about me at this point, I actually got blocked on WhatsApp, which sounds like I'm 15. It sounds like I'm a child. And the logic behind it was my husband didn't want me to message whilst they were away because he was using his phone as like a sat nav. And he didn't want the awkward, oh, here's a message popping up and having to explain why he's receiving it. And rationally, I get the logic. You know, we had various other methods of communication. It's not like he was off radar. He ended up being on the phone to me most days for hours at a time. So he very much stayed in communication. But you're in this situation where you're like, okay, so I'm trying to build a life with someone. I'm buying us a house. Yeah, I'm blocked on WhatsApp. And it was the most almost pathetic thing. But yeah, it really, really hurt. And it sounds terrible, but he had a miserable time. And I'm really pleased about that, you know, because I didn't want them to. I thought there's a real risk that this is a prime opportunity for their relationship to be rekindled. You know, they're taken away from reality. They're spending that one-on-one time. The kids are obviously there and excited and all of that. But yeah, he absolutely hated it. And within hours, it was, I want to come home. I don't want to be here. But yeah, there are plenty of instances like that where, you know, you're the one in the shade. And quite rightly at times, because obviously the kids' welfare comes first. But it's no way to be in a relationship.
Yeah, that must have been incredibly difficult. And I guess so many questions running around your head. Minds are good at playing tricks on us. But then, you know, when you were saying about, oh, I wondered, would they rekindle? Like part of me was thinking, well, it shows you that things are done.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And the greatest strength of our relationship is that we are so open with each other. And I know him, and I know that if there was any suggestion that it was going to be rekindled, I would have known about it instantly. That, you know, there would be absolutely no secrecy or anything like that. It was a good experience in that respect. He really, really struggled, just, you know, obviously being away from home anyway. But the last night, understandably, his ex got incredibly upset because it was, you know, this last night of us pretending to be a family. And he really, really struggled in that moment of, how do I comfort her? And it was a very odd moment. I was literally on the phone to him and I said, you've got to man up and comfort her. She's in distress. It's a horrific situation for everyone. And I literally said, just do what you need to do. It's a very odd kind of position to put yourself in, to say that to your partner. It was a very awkward, you know, a hug, there, it'll be okay type situation. And then they came back and the divorce was expedited. So yeah, it was a clear end to everything. A horrible position.
I can't even imagine, as that woman, why you would want to go on the holiday. I mean, my only thought is maybe she thought they could rekindle things. I guess she didn't know about you. That must have been her expectation. Otherwise, why would you put yourself through that? So, as you say, probably at the end of the week or however long, she thought, right, this isn't going to happen. This is the end. But yeah, incredibly difficult for everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think with their marriage, I think they fell into the same trap that probably a lot of people do, that because they didn't argue, I think they thought it could continue. But the kids absolutely must have picked up on the atmosphere, the lack of affection or whatever tends to exist in a happy relationship. And from what I can understand, they coexisted like that for a considerable period of time. But yeah, she absolutely held on to the hope that it would be rekindled.
So at this point, their divorce is being expedited. How long is it that you guys have been together at this point?
Probably 6, 7, 8 months. So quite a long time.
And then at what point did you meet the children?
So the divorce was finalised. This could sound terrible. It was actually finalised on her birthday. And she was still, when I say her, I mean the ex, sorry. She was still not in a great place at all. And I said to my husband, you can't tell her right now. She's struggling as it is. You can't hit her with one more blow. So the ex ended up finding out literally a few weeks after the divorce came through. He told her, and then a week later, on the next kind of set of him having the children, I met the children for the first time. But it was very much an introduction of, this is my friend. It wasn't anything more than that.
And what did he tell her?
So he said that he had been, is the dynamic between my husband, his ex, and myself is odd the majority of the time. So he told her that he had started to see someone, that it was serious, that we were moving in together, that we wanted the children to be at our house when, during the pattern that my husband was having them. And her initial response was, great, I'm seeing someone too. It was almost like this tit for tat. Well, actually, if you are, then I am too. I can do better than this. And that's pretty much been the dynamic since that point. It's very, very odd that she was, I guess, as supportive as she could be, in terms of, it was, okay, that's fine. The children can go to the house. To this day, however, she knows nothing about me. We've never met. She doesn't know my full name. I think she vaguely knows what I do as a profession. I don't think she knows my age, anything about me whatsoever. So it's still like, it was almost like denial. And we're married now. This is a relationship to stay. Yeah, this relationship between the ex and I is just non-existent.
God, there's a lot to unpick there. So, firstly, I was really surprised when you shared what her reaction was when he told her.
I know, right? it was my husband went in there literally ready to battle, ready. He hates confrontation. He's not someone that likes conflict in any shape or form. We'd almost rehearsed the speech to help prepare him and help him feel confident about it. And we'd already anticipated various reactions on access to children, on money, the usual contentious elements that get argued. And there was absolutely none of it. I mean, obviously you're relieved because you're thinking, thank God, not, we don't have to deal with the aggro from this. But you're also like, this is a bit of an anticlimax, actually. Why did we worry about being courteous? Why did we wait until the divorce was finalised? Should have just cracked on and told her, right at the start.
So much has happened to you in such a short space of time. It must have felt like a bit of a roller coaster, but I guess at the same time, a good one. So you've met the kids on the kind of, this is dad's friend base. How did things progress from there?
So it progressed far too quickly for everyone. We were in a situation where we were essentially living separate lives for a large part of the time. It had seriously taken its toll on our relationship. So our aim was to get everyone into the same house as quickly as possible. But we just did it way, way, way too quick. So we literally went from me meeting the children for whatever it was, an hour in the park, to them staying with us within something like 3 or 4 weeks. Ridiculously quick. Because of the custody pattern at the time, they were with us for days at a time. So it's not even we did it as, say, one night and built up. We went from 0 to 60. The children actually, outwardly at least, seem to adapt really, really well. They seem to be very excited about being in the new house. It helped that we just got a puppy. So the puppy was like the icebreaker, the thing that everyone wanted to play with. But for my husband and I, oh, yeah, way, 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 way too quick. All it did was bring a huge amount of stress, a huge amount of pressure. We were both thrown into a situation where neither of us had ever raised a child. We'd never been that day-to-day parent figure. So we had a huge amount of practicalities, which quite frankly, we were clueless about. We had no idea what to do. And just simple things, or I say simple to a lot of parents, but things like getting the kids ready for school in the morning was incredibly stressful. We didn't really know how early to get various kids up to get to their various schools. It doesn't help that we live about 30-40 minute drive from the school, so it's not local to us. So yeah, it was a baptism of fire.
And Sarah, there'll be women listening to this thinking, well, what does she mean her partner didn't know how to raise kids? Like, he had a 5-year-old and an 8-year-old. Where was he in their life?
Yeah, and that was absolutely my thing as well. I was very much, well, if you were a father, then you should have fulfilled that traditional father role. But he's a shift worker, which meant that realistically there were large periods of time that he wasn't around in the children's lives because of work. I think the ex was fairly similar to a lot of women in that as soon as the children came along, because my husband was, works away for so much, that actually the children became her focus. And she obviously built up her routines and what have you, so that even when he was around, he was very much on the periphery. My husband, he is not a natural father. He really, really struggles. So it wasn't something he was naturally good at. And I think that absolutely dented his confidence. So he wouldn't assert himself, he wouldn't push himself into that role. And I think bottom line is that he wasn't ready for the children. And as an outsider, I would listen to these comments and I'd be like, you're kidding me, right? You're an adult enough to make these children. You need to be adult enough to parent them. But it's being this like, you're watching someone struggle. It's incredibly emotive, but it's all accumulated. And the stupid thing is that he will constantly beat himself up for being a bad father. And my response to him is that he is a far better father now than he has ever been, because he's engaged, he's interested, he makes time for them, he does things with them, which if he was still in the marital home, I'm pretty certain he wouldn't be doing. So yes, he's not with them 24/7, but actually the time he is with them is so much more valuable and beneficial. Yeah, it's very difficult, because my instant judgment is, do you know what, man up, you conceive these. This is your responsibility.
I think you're spot on about the quality time. We talked in one of the earlier episodes this series to a psychologist who sort of said, you don't actually need a lot of time with your children. What you need is to be able to give them pockets of focus and pockets of time. So you could be a parent who lived with your kid 24/7, but if they're constantly on their iPad, then you're not having fun. You're not playing games. You're not dancing around the kitchen and all that good stuff. So yeah, it is an interesting twist around time versus other things. You talked a bit about how the children adapted quite well, but how it was more of a challenge for you and your partner. And we've talked a little bit about how it felt and looked for your partner. What about you?
Oh, I hated it. Absolutely hated it. There were so many conflicting emotions about it. My partner and I, when it's just us, we live in this most amazing bubble. Yeah, we are each other's best friends. It's a bubble full of fun and laughter and everything else. And then the children come, and the bubble bursts, and it's literally an invasion. And I don't know whether it's because it's kids as a concept, whether it's because there's three of them, whether it's because of their particular ages, but it just all accumulates, and it's your life is turned upside down for this period of time. And you try to be as prepared as you physically can before that. But it is, as I say, literally an invasion of, this is my own home, but it's not my home when they're here. And we're incredibly lucky in that the children are very, very, very well behaved. They're very polite. They're very well mannered. They very much want to help. They're very respectful. You know, there's absolutely no elements of their behavior that make the situation worse whatsoever. We are incredibly lucky in that respect. So it is essentially all me and my feelings, as opposed to the children generating it through their actions. It's something that, to start with, you think, okay, no, we just need this period of adjustment. We just need to get through it. They'll get better. And the longer it goes on and it doesn't get better, of course, that then skews your confidence and your ability to deal with it. Fundamentally, my coping mechanism is that I'm really lucky. I work from home and I have a job which can be incredibly demanding. So my coping mechanism was, quite frankly, work even more hours when they were here. It was a very plausible excuse not to be around them. And my husband completely saw through what I was doing. He absolutely knew I did not need to be working until stupidly late at night on these particular days. It was absolutely a mechanism not to spend time with them.
So what did he say to you about that?
It was literally just do what you need to do. I think he because he himself was struggling as well, he was respectful that I was too, in that it wasn't like he enjoyed this time. So it's not like he was like, come on, you've got to join in with the party. You've got to embrace it, because he absolutely was not either. So he kind of thought, you know what, we've just got to get through this in our own particular ways. He would very much manage the situation. He would go into practical mode. It's almost like he had this mental checklist of feed them breakfast, take them to school, take the little one to the childminder, do X, Y, Z chore, feed them dinner, pick them, you know, whatever the list of practical things were. And he was almost on robot mode, like literally tick the box, move to the next one. And in the early days, he was so fixated on doing the practicalities, he actually spent no time with the children. Like he was literally, okay, here's your dinner. Okay, I've got to go and load the dishwasher or whatever it was. And the children will be sat there eating dinner in silence because there's no one to interact with them. And one of the things that my husband and I worked on, which it sounds really weird, it was so much easier to help my husband through this and to help him to be better with it than to help myself. So it was kind of like, okay, well, do you know what? I'm shit at this. That's okay right now because I can just avoid it. My husband can't avoid it. He's going to have the most impact on the children. How do we get him to a better position? So that almost became the aim of these days, to make my husband more involved, more engaged with it all. And it's really, really worked. You know, he deliberately now will, for example, over dinner time, sit with them and talk to them and engage them in whatever subject. And, you know, he was that awful dad that sat on their phones constantly when the kids were here. So the phone's away. You know, he doesn't do that anymore. And every now and again, he still needs a prompt of, you know, go and be sociable, go and talk to them, go and see what activity they're doing. But overall, he is so much better. That was almost became another coping mechanism of mine, of focus on my husband and then kind of worry about me afterwards.
Yeah, it sounds so difficult. And I really, really admire your courageousness in talking about this stuff, because it's not easy, especially when you're talking about some of the more uncomfortable things for you. So if you've got a situation where you've got well-behaved kids, you've got an ex who's not causing you lots of stress and drama, it sounds like it was just the huge sudden shift in lifestyle that was the major issue for you.
Yeah. I think the two major issues were the sudden change, and deep down there was a reason I didn't want to date someone with children, and that's not gone away. So it was those two things. So it's almost like I've been fighting my kind of natural desires. And one of the things that I'd say to anyone, that I think as the older you get, there is this expectation that, it's going to sound a horrible phrase, but you accept baggage, whether it be children, exes, debts, whatever the hell it is. And it's almost like, well, as soon as you do get to your late 30s, 40s, older, there is this like, well, you've kind of got to accept it, because quite frankly, there's no one out there that doesn't have an element of something. And that is so wrong, because you've got to see something like having children as like a core value. So, if for example, religion was incredibly important to you, you wouldn't date someone with a different faith or a different stance on religion. So having children, you've got to view it in the same respect, because it is so naturally ingrained in me that I do not want this family set up. That is a massive barrier to overcome. And it is getting easier, but I don't think, well, certainly not for the foreseeable, that I'll be in a position where I embrace it, or it's something that I kind of enjoy. It's very much an obligation.
Mm. And what does your relationship with your stepkids look like day to day?
Actually really good, which is ironic. Because of my feelings, I have never, ever, ever attempted to be a mum. I've never particularly attempted to be a friend. I've always been there and absolutely will help them and will listen to them and encourage them. I'm far more outgoing than my husband. So if the children need a push, to do a new activity or to try and make a new friend, then I am absolutely the one to say, you can do this. It's fine, do it. It's actually really good, because as I said, I've never tried to be anything more. And I think they understand and respect that. And they see me as daddy's wife. They like coming to our house. My husband had them the other day and didn't bring them to the house. He took them to another activity. And they were really upset they didn't get to come to the house. So, and that is actually a really lovely thing to know and to hear. But I think it is because I have been deliberately not trying to be something specific that it's actually working out quite well.
Do you know, it's really interesting, because I totally hear everything that you're saying, but when you're talking about them and the relationship, you look really happy.
It's do you know what, the biggest conflict ever. Yeah, I do get joy from it, but it's within very limited areas. I think the main reason that I can get joy from it now is because we've gone through various iterations of the custody agreement to get it to a stage where it actually works for my husband and myself. So we started off with a situation where, because of my husband's work, he's never going to be the stereotypic every other weekend or, whatever it is. So we went from a stage where my husband would essentially finish work within a matter of hours, have the children for X amount of days, drop the children back to their house, and then within hours start work again. So we essentially didn't have a life as a couple. So we've gone through however many iterations, almost playing around to see actually what could work for us and what wouldn't work. And we've landed in a place which, as I say, for a couple, it really works for us. It doesn't work for the elder children. So I think it will need to change.
And what does that current situation look like?
So currently, again, because my husband's shifts, it's not a black and white kind of regular thing. He basically has them one day over the weekend, on a weekend that he's not working, just for the day. He doesn't have them overnight. And then he will have them for a handful of days after school between those weekends that he has them. It took us a long time to get to this place, predominantly through guilt, through this belief that we should be trying to do the right thing. We were in one of those situations where his ex very much wanted him to have the children. We were definitely not in this situation where the ex kind of controlled access. It was very much, no, have them completely. In her ideal world, I don't think she would have wanted him to have 100% custody, but absolutely the vast majority in her ideal world. And so we've had to negotiate. The custody was never agreed at court. It was always an agreement between the two of them. But we did get to the stage where we were having them 1 or 2 nights every other week. My husband was very vocal to me, not to the children, obviously, not to the ex, that he wanted to reduce it further. He wanted to take out the overnights. I still can't understand, but my husband really struggled with them being here overnight. And I personally don't get it, because to me, when they're in bed, that's the great time. That's when you can breathe and have your wine and relax and all of that. They slept through the night. They went to bed quite early. There was no trouble per se from that. But for a couple of months, he was very, very vocal. I can't cope. I can't have them here overnight anymore. It was always me saying, it's not right for the kids. You need to keep going. And that in itself is a really difficult thing to say when you're like literally crying inside thinking, every minute is torture. Do you know what? In my ideal world, would never see them again, never mind anything else. So having to essentially say to your husband, no, we need to keep having them, it was horrific. It was like, I can't believe I'm saying this. I was almost detached from it. And, my husband and I, when we argue, inevitably it's about the children. During these arguments, my husband would always throw at me, well, you're the one that says I've got to still see the children. And he would very much say out of anger and frustration as opposed to real kind of belief. But having that thrown at you when you hate the situation and you're desperate to get out of it, you're just like, come on, don't beat me up for trying to do the right thing here. But anyway, so we went through this couple of months of him really vocal about not wanting to have them overnight. And as I kept saying, no, we need to. And then really luckily, his ex-wife asked for more money. And my husband was already paying the amount dictated. My husband said, well, you can have more money, but that means that the time I have the children is less, because I'm not paying you more and still paying, obviously, when the children are with us for, their necessities and what have you. And this was said in the absolute expectation. She would say, okay, I'm fine. I don't need the money. My husband's ex is very wealthy. So she doesn't, she didn't need the money at all. She turned around and said, I'll have the money, please. And we're kind of like, again, a reaction of, wow, okay. As I say, it works great for us because we've now reduced, obviously, the custody to, let's say, that day at the weekend and after school. And it was completely, again, unexpected. It was a really odd reaction. It's apparent that the elder two aren't getting the exposure to the dad that they need. So I think we will need to increase it. But the nice thing about it is, actually, now we've been able to take a step back, we can manage the time that we have the kids much better. We're much more confident, much more settled with it. So if we do need to increase it, actually that's okay. If it is actually a few more nights after school, or one night overnight or something like that, it doesn't fill you with the same dread that it used to. So it's hopefully, we're in a good place. Hopefully it does kind of move forward in a more constructive way for everyone.
Yeah, and I think getting to that point, because like you said, you went so fast at the beginning, you've almost hit your brake button, reversed a bit, and then just moved forward a bit more slowly. So it's giving you more time, I guess, to get to know each other, get used to life with kids. Because, it's interesting. I was speaking to a stepmom the other day who didn't have any biological children and also met a guy with 3 kids. And she said to me, most people, apart from those who have triplets, have a kid, have a while to get used to having a kid. Then they might have another kid. Then, and they might get a year off work, or I know you're still at work when you're on maternity leave. I've done 3 of them, but you get that space, you get that time, you get to learn. Whereas I think something that I hadn't appreciated as somebody who had biological kids when I became a stepmom was that sort of quote unquote invasion, as you call it, is real. You're used to having your home exactly as you want it, and then suddenly there's almost like this stampede, and it's hard. And I don't think we recognize enough how hard that is for women who don't already have children when they become a stepmom?
Yeah, it turns everything on its head. And I think society just does not help, because if I have one more person say to me, well, you knew he had kids when you got with him, I will kill them. Literally. It is the most unhelpful comment that anyone could ever give you. And it can't be underestimated as well. Like the unconditional love, the biological link, you see things far more objectively when you're in that step parent role. And, I say we're really fortunate the kids are so well behaved, but if they do have a moment, you see it as they're being a sport brat or they're doing something. Whereas biological parent is, oh, isn't that amazing? They've just done this, or it can't be underestimated. But as I say, my husband and I, we had to learn how to parent. And when you've got three of them with various ages, various needs, that in itself is really hard. It's like we wanted to throw one of them a birthday party. Just even learning how to organize a kid's birthday party, we're both like clueless, thinking, don't even know what we need. And you have to actually sit there like a full-blown project management meeting of, right, okay, so cake, decorations, presents, who do we invite? And we forgot to invite someone, and then we forgot to do party bags, and even stuff like that, that when you're a biological parent, I don't think it's natural. You don't naturally know, okay, yeah, you must have XYZ for a party, but you learn. And if you do fuck it up, it's okay. It isn't like this whole, you're on display, you're being judged by the world, you've got to get it right.
And I wonder, it's interesting. I was just thinking, because you've shared that you've always had a challenging career. I wonder how much of it felt difficult because, you're at the top of your game in your career, and then you're going into this brand new thing that by your own admission, you're like, what the fuck am I supposed to do?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not one of life's natural achievers. Everything I've got, I've worked incredibly hard for. When you are good at what you do for a living, when you have a successful kind of social life, there is this expectation that, okay, well, next thing I turn my hat to, I can do. And you do fail and you feel so inadequate. Like some of the ladies that you've spoken to before are incredible and inspirational. And some of the things that some have dealt with, you just think, shit in hell, I have no idea how you manage that. When it's a good day, you hear those stories and you think this is really inspirational. When it's a bad day, you think you just make me feel even more shit about myself. It's really, really difficult. But I think over time, we've come to the understanding of it's not natural to either of us, but we're doing okay. And that's all we aim for. One of the things that really, really helped us, we actually started couples therapy really early on in our relationship. We've been together about a year or so, and we started to go to therapy. And there's still a stigma that's attached to attending therapy, especially for men. And my husband felt that we were failing as a couple because we were seeking help so early on. But for us, it was a lifeline. It was that safe space of actually, let's talk about what's happening. How can we process stuff? And one of the things that the therapist taught us to do is actually do look at the time that we have the children as a work project, because we needed survival. We're kind of moving on to enjoyment and all of that, but we just needed survival. And both of us are quite, we've got successful careers, we're good at organization and things like that. So it was literally the biggest hint that we could have had to help our situation. You ultimately have to use your strengths. And over time, the things that aren't so natural to you do become easier. But without this therapist saying to us, you need to project manage this, I don't think we'd be here now. I really don't think we'd still be in a relationship.
And I think it's so vital to get that outside support. And a lot of couples I've seen in my own personal life, step families and non-step families, they wait till it's too late. And then by that point, you've passed the point where the counselling can help you. So I'm a massive believer in getting therapy early on, have that safe space. I work with lots of women one-to-one and in group settings, and they will all, say there's like a weight that's been lifted, or they see things differently, or it just creates that space that you can dedicate to yourself. And that's super, super important.
Yeah, absolutely. And my husband was actually the one who suggested therapy. which I was really pleased about. It's something that I'm an advocate of anyway. But to me, it just demonstrated as well for him how much he's changed, because at no point in his first marriage did he or his wife or his ex-wife seek help. And I don't know if they had, whether actually it would have changed things. I don't know. But to me, when you've got children involved, it's such a key step. Don't give up. Don't let the problems escalate to the stage where there is no going back from it. But yeah, as I say, for us, it was an absolute lifeline. And it gave us an opportunity to discuss things, like the WhatsApp incident, to discuss that. And, my husband realized, oh, wait a minute, that was a dick move. That was really hurtful. And both of us, will agree, rationally, it was the right thing to do at the time. Actually, for our sake and our relationship, it was absolutely the wrong thing to do.
I'm just so impressed by how you're able to talk so candidly about all these things that have gone on, and how it would have been really easy for you to put yourself and your husband 100% first 100% of the time. But despite all the things that you're saying about the children, you are still trying to do the best. And actually, it's a long-term game, right? Step parenting. Sometimes I'll speak to stepmums and they'll say, my stepdaughter won't come to our house, or my stepson won't engage with me when he's there. And it's always about the long term. And I think we're so desperate always to form this lovely, happy family straight away that it puts you under unnecessary pressure. And one of the things that's really struck me is how you've always had such low expectations going into it. That actually you've done a really good job. And because your expectations have been so low, you've got this good relationship with the kids because you haven't gone on too strong. You haven't kind of stepped in and tried really hard to do the right thing. You've just gone, I'm doing me. Maybe there's something we can all learn from that.
But that wasn't deliberate. I wish it was, to be honest, in terms of one of the most powerful moments for me was literally only a handful of months ago. The children weren't here. It was literally my husband and I. And I think my husband was watching TV. I was reading a book. The dog was in his bed. And I had that light bulb moment of, this is my family. And that's okay. You're so busy trying to make this work with the kids. And we must be this hunky-dory step family. My husband's terrible. He looks at things like on Facebook. There'll be a picture of a step family. I know, it's the really cheesy, everyone's wearing matching pajamas or whatever. And my husband will look at these photos and get really upset and say, why can't that be us? And for a long, long time, we both had that's what we should be aiming for. But the moment you take that step back and think, actually, it's okay if you don't get there. Oh my God, it was so, so empowering. And the best thing that could have happened. But since that moment, things have got so much better because we're not trying to shoehorn everyone into this mold. And there's actually now a desire to try and make us a family. Whereas before, it was all through obligation, all through because this is what society say we should do. So it's nice that we've been able to get some relief from the pressure, but actually now to see it as, that'd be a nice to have. That's a nice to do.
Yeah, and I think it's a game-changing way to look at it, isn't it? So it sounds like you're in a really strong place now, both in your relationship and in the direction of the family and the children. What are your hopes for the future?
So I hope that we all keep growing. I still don't have that, I guess, aspiration of being a stereotypic stepmom. I hope that I can keep being a positive influence on their lives, obviously on my husband's life as well. I hope that my husband continues on the path that he's on and becomes that more involved father. We're actually pregnant as well, which...
Okay, I wasn't expecting that.
No, nor were we, to be honest with you. It was one of those, we had a conversation a long time ago of, oh, one day it might be okay if we had a child. And this was actually as part of the conversations of, do we even attempt to make our relationship go that extra step? As I say, it was completely unexpected. We fell pregnant. The baby is actually due literally within the next few weeks. So it's fairly imminent that they're going to be joining us. I hope that we find some kind of peace with the setup. Being pregnant has certainly made, I guess, the emotional impact harder of the dynamics of the family. I really, really struggled, for example, in the early days. Like, my husband would refer to the baby as the sibling of the children, which rationally is the right thing to do. But for me, I was like, but he's not their sibling. This is our child. This is separate. One of the hardest things I found was that my husband had been through, essentially this process before with someone else, and very, very recently in the grand scheme of things. And it was incredibly difficult to accept that. And my husband has been amazing, absolutely amazing. He is so excited about this baby, probably in his mind too much, because he now feels so much guilt that he was never as excited about any of the other children. He's been amazing, really engaged, really embracing everything. He's the one that's propelled us forward throughout it. So it's been this really, really rocky road to get to the stage where actually I want our child to have a relationship with the other children. I want them to be involved. But what I hope is that moving forward, actually that can help us become more of of this family. I don't want the baby to push out any of the children in any way, or make them feel insignificant or replaced. So I think that's we've got a lot of work to do on that. But I think it will be a good, positive kind of step forward. It's a new beginning.
Overwhelmingly, the stories I hear about a new baby joining a family are positive. Overwhelmingly, because everybody suddenly loves the same person. Real love. Everybody's got a connection to this baby. And I know I certainly felt a really strong connection with both my stepdaughters when I saw how they were with my biological children, who were their genetic relatives.
I think I'm starting to look at the children in a different way. And I don't know whether it's because I'm starting to not see them as the enemy. I'm starting to recognise, these are kids that, through absolutely no fault of their own, are in not a great situation. And I think it's made me as a person more empathetic, more compassionate. So even before baby come in, I can already see it making a difference. But yeah, I mean, as I say, when we got the puppy...
Was that the puppy I just heard?
It was him, yeah. so when he came along, he was the best thing we could have done. If the baby can have even just a tiny % of positive influence that the puppy had, then absolutely it's got to be a good thing.
I'm sure it will. Sarah, it's been awesome to talk to you. I've really enjoyed it, and I could have carried on talking to you for much longer, actually, but I'm sure you've got things that you need to get on and do. So look, thank you so much, and wishing you every bit of luck with your pregnancy. I'd love to talk to you again in the future. I really hope that you get to a place that you're really comfortable with in yourself, and that everybody in your family can find their place in.
Thank you very much, and thank you for doing this as well.
No worries, you're so welcome. Wow, what a conversation. Huge thank you to Sarah for getting in touch with me and for being brave enough to speak so openly about her feelings. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please can I ask you to rate or review wherever you listen. It only takes a second, but it really helps us with getting the show to other stepmums. And as always, if you've got a story you'd like to share, please do get in touch on the socials at stepmumspace or through the website www.stepmumspace.com, where you'll find lots of other bits and pieces and tailored support opportunities. Do hit subscribe on your podcast app to be notified when next week's episode drops. Lots of love!